10 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, everyone. A very good afternoon. We are pleased to have everyone with us this afternoon. I'm Anton Fallon, the voice of the webinar and the chief evangelist for Luminary Learning Solutions. As we draw close to the series, welcome to Revive and Grow, not just another webinar, but a part of the formula that contributes to the unique Saturdays After Learning with Luminary, with segments and topics that will unfold right till the end of August. So gear up and get your learning on. In today's segment, Revive and Grow, we're looking at handling conflict at work, a conversational exchange of experiences, perspectives, grasp best practices, and alter perceptions, and certainly points to implement and take away. Facilitating this conversation today is Senaka Premaratne, who is a trainer with Luminary Learning Solutions. And joining us today, and it gives me great pleasure, welcome Andeline Raza. Now, Andeline has working or with 15 years of experience from working as a senior advisor to the UK government, working for UNHRC. She is currently the founder of Andeline Consulting in Malaysia and a licensed Master NLP, a personal and professional development trainer and educator. Good afternoon, Andeline. We've got a second guest this afternoon is none other than Varnika Soya, the channel head for corporate partnership life, Janashakthi Life, with over 20 years of experience in sales, brands, and general management. Currently provides life insurance solutions for mid-large corporates. And warm welcome, Varnika. Now over to them for what promises to be an hour of riveting conversation. Senaka, over to you.
Thank you, Anton. Welcome, all of you. We are going next 60 minutes, so it's going to be handling conflicts at work. Let's make it as interesting as possible. We will sort of focus more on the real aspects of conflict management rather than discussing models and various theories, while that is available in the public domain. What is more important would be sort of looking into the practical aspects of managing conflicts at work. Let me kick off with a quote from Dorothy Thomas. She says, "Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with it." Let me repeat, peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with it. I thought it's a very nice quote with regard to managing conflict. Without taking much of time, let us hear from Andeline. Andeline, we would like to know from you, is there, with your experience, have you sort of come across any study or literature as such that indicates the impact of conflict to a business?
Right. Okay. Thank you, Senaka, for that. And yes, there is a ton of research on this. But first of all, I'd like to say that we should totally always expect as a starting point to disagree with other people. And it always amuses me when people say, oh, how do we sort this conflict? Because they always expect people to agree with each other. But if we take the starting point as there are different people with different temperaments, different personalities, different attributes, it goes to show, and it will follow, that naturally there will be some conflict when it comes to any area of discussion. And whether that becomes a small disagreement or it becomes a full blown out conflict, it's really qualitative. We can't really quantify that because it really depends on the output of what that means, of that conflict. So we need to be able to, first of all, establish, is it something that's of real importance and is going to have real impact on the company and the performance, or is it just something that needs resolving at very low levels? And as a coach, I work with different businesses, I work with different individuals, I work with people outside of their businesses. People are people, right? So if you're a person working in a business and you have a certain way of being, you are going to be that same kind of person, more or less, when you're at home or when you're with other people. So we have to really start looking at people as opposed to these sort of placements that we have in roles that they carry out in organizations. And at the point when we start treating people like people and as individuals, we can resolve half the conflict right there, because now I see you, I understand you. And that within itself allows the person to be acknowledged, and we already at the starting point ready to solve whatever problem is there. So I wouldn't say that there's anything specific that I want to make reference to, but I'd say that there is so much out there, but facts and figures in of themselves doesn't mean that, and good models doesn't reflect that the issue is resolved. It's really looking underneath the work culture. How do people feel when they come into work every day? How do people feel when they're with their work colleagues, as opposed to just getting the job done?
Thank you, Annalene. Varnika, would we hear from you, sir? What do you have to what is your idea on the
basically
impact or business impact of conflict?
Yeah, conflict, I think, is part and parcel of the organization. I don't think we can ever leave conflict out of a day-to-day corporate life. It's something that we have to deal with within our own teams, as well as deal with the outside teams as well. So it's an ongoing battle of trying to sort out A person's issue, B person's issue, and what A person has with another division altogether as well. So it's a day in, day out issue that we as team leaders or managers have to deal with in our routine corporate lives. But the important thing, I believe, is that whenever you're at a point of conflict, you need to understand the person and what the issue is. So it's best that we have a separation of these two, so we can take a step back, reflect, and then try and address the real issue rather than going head on up front.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Varnika, that actually brings up a really interesting article that got made viral a number of years ago. It was popularized, I think, in the Huffington Post, New York Times. And the article, you may have come across it, it was called "It's Not About the Dishes." So it wasn't specifically about corporates, but you'll see the analogy if you haven't come across it. So let me explain how it's relevant. So this article spoke about how generally in most households you find that it's the woman who ends up taking on the mental load and the sort of laundry, the dishes, the cleaning, the kids, whatever it is. And so, you know, partner unseemingly, very innocently may put his glass and his dish right next to the sink, and then, you know, his partner just completely, you know, blows up and just says, "What do you mean? Why are you leaving these dishes here?" And he thinks it's about the dishes. So he picks up his cup and he picks up his plate and he starts washing it because he thinks, well, that's a bit of an overreaction, takes the cup or offloads it on the dishwasher, cleans it up, and he thinks the problem is now solved, right? She got angry about the dish. He's now resolved that and everything's fine. But of course, we all know, and that's the title of the article, it's not about the dishes, right? This is about the simmering discontent. It's about the level of respect that is shown within this relationship. The fact that I am expected to take this on, and you would assume that this is something I should be doing or you should get asked to do. So actually, it's got nothing to do with that, but there's no clarity in what are our roles here and how are we going to support each other. And if these assumptions are led to just continue, what happens over a period of time is discontent builds up, and then, you know, it becomes about that one thing. And that's why, as you know, you mentioned earlier, it is never about what is mentioned on the off, that this is the issue. What's actually underneath that conflict? We need to get deep below what's really going on here. And it's not always so obvious, because especially in business management, people want quick answers quickly, big results. They don't want to waste time. But I always say to people, if you waste time here, you're going to end up saving a lot of time later on, because people are going to be able to understand each other in a way they've never done before. And these are the people that you want to make sure continue as your business grows. So you don't want to lose them because of a misunderstanding or an assumption of some kind. So we really need to dig deep when it comes to conflicts. And the same thing at home, the same thing in businesses, but just in a different environment.
Thank you, Annelien. Thank you very much. On the same note, can I just, would you permit me to ask, in your own sentiment, what exactly is a conflict in your own terms? We have seen a lot of definitions for conflict, but in your own understanding.
Well, the conflict, I don't know whether there's a standard sort of like definition for it, but there is a disagreement that's causing discontent, right? So you have to, first of all, be really honest and not just say, oh, it doesn't bother me, but it actually does, because you're not actually being honest about it, because you don't want to be seen to be, you know, too kind of picky or too difficult to manage. So sometimes we're not completely honest. So we have to realize when is something important to us and when is something not. And that's why temperament is really, really important, because, you know, there may be some people that you can pretty much say anything to them and it's like water off a duck's back. They don't really allow things to affect them personally. And there's other people who are super sensitive, and you can say the tiniest thing and they will take it very personally. And because they do, it creates this sort of like gap, because we treat other people as we are ourselves. So if I'm generally very frank, honest, open person, and I treat somebody in that same way because I feel like this is how I am, I respect myself, so this is how I communicate with someone else, the other person is a completely different personality from me, and they generally are more reserved, more quiet, more sensitive, they're very considered, they don't, you know, they think through things in a very specific order and sequence, so they only communicate in this way, which makes me think, hold on, are they being honest and open? So you can see already there's this room that's been created where there can be an easy misunderstanding. That leads to, if there's a project, put on the deadlines, increase the stress levels, cortisol levels go up, and before you know it, boom, you've got a full-blown conflict, and what's going to happen now? So a lot of this really is about the stories we tell ourselves. So it's really important to get underneath any conflict and understand, what is the story I'm telling myself about this conflict? And what is the stories that other people are saying in their heads about the conflict? Because we have to understand we all have different mental models and filters through which we see the world. So my perceived understanding is just that. It's not truth, it's only truth to me. And it's the same for everyone else. You've got to extend everybody that. And I always say when we talk about resolving conflict, you know, it's not about me against you, because it becomes clash of the egos. And the person usually with the highest grade says, well, it's my decision, we're doing it this way, right? So we have to say it's all of us against the problem, right? It's all of us against the issue that we are trying to resolve. So you're already bringing in a united front and not, oh, I listen to you because I agree with what you're saying. And this is why we often see in a lot of businesses, people hire people like them because they relate to them. They think they can get the job done better and more faster and more effective. But that's not always the best way, because conflict is also really, really good when it comes to creativity. Because if we all agree with each other and I have the same kind of experiences as you, I'm not going to have the diversity of thought. I'm not going to be able to stretch myself. And I always say, if you agree with each other all the time, that must make for a really dull workplace. You want to have some disagreement, because at the point when somebody challenges me, I'm actually stretched to think beyond my comfort zone. And now I have to come up with another way of thinking. That benefits me and it benefits the organization, because they want to get the best creative solutions out there. So sometimes we've got to just get comfortable with the discomfort. And a lot of people are really uncomfortable with the discomfort, and it's normal. And cultural norms also, you might find that other people are fairly okay with raising voices and saying things and then going out for a drink later. And others, they feel like it's disrespect even to raise your tone. So you've got to be really careful of the cultural norms that are expected, not violating those, because then you're not going to get any respect, but also at the same time stretching people enough to see what is this conflict about. Tell me the story you're telling themselves. So I always say to people, okay, I want to really understand it from your point of view. I may completely disagree, right? But just share me the story that you've got playing in your head right now. It's their truth. At the point when they've released that, actually they have no attachment to it anymore, because now they feel heard, they feel seen. And if we as team members can allow ourselves that environment which is conducive to that type of being heard, then you can create magic. So I would say to people, if someone is creating conflict, like you could be coming out with your next big multi-million-dollar idea, you know, don't quash it down, because you never know what's going to come from it. But like I said, most people are afraid of dealing with emotions. They're uncomfortable with what other people may perceive them to be if they continue what they think is hurting the other person. And so we have to get beyond the hurt and the pain of somebody disagreeing with us and getting to the root of what is the problem we need to solve, which of course is not a problem, it's just a project. So we always just see it as a project. There's no problem there in the first place.
Very nice perspective, and Lynn, seeing the root cause as a project, very nice perspective. I'm sure the audience will be benefiting from you a lot. Varnika, may we hear from you, sir? Like, what sort of conflicts that in a workplace that is more common? Is it boss subordinate sort of conflicts or peer sort of conflicts? It's probably, you know, if you ask me, you know, I'm also representing a corporate sector. I see it's very difficult to say which one is more, because I see a lot of people disagreeing with the boss. That's a conflict in itself between the boss and the subordinate. And then following boss's instructions, you see peer conflicts. So what are your perspectives on this, Varnika?
Okay. Basically, you can't, I don't think you can have boundaries to say this is where exactly you're going to have conflicts in. If you're in corporate life, you need to be prepared to have conflicts with your boss, with your subordinates, as well as among your peers, especially when you are moving up. I mean, in my line of work, I'm in sales, so we are constantly looking at getting better rates, negotiating better service standards, negotiating for quick solutions and things like that. So we are always, I mean, in my line of work, we have constant battles with peers. But at the same time, as a manager, I do have to deal with conflicts among my team members, which are among themselves, which could be a conflict with me. I have to deal with conflicts with my own superior, because you need to understand the fact, just like Annelien said, we don't come from the same backgrounds. We don't have the same exposures. We don't have the same mindset when we walk in, even on a daily basis. So you need to figure out where you stand at the moment. I mean, I have about 30 in my team. Not all 30 are the same. Not all 30 have the same attitudes. Not all 30 have come from the same colleges or the same education backgrounds. They don't come from the same, have the same qualification. You need to have an idea of what kind, between myself and one of my team members, the resolution for each of them differs from one to another. And it's the same with my superior or with my peers. You have various kinds of conflicts going on. So, but you need to figure out what exactly the conflict is, what exactly is the issue that you need to address, and you need to have an objective of what resolution that you want at the end of the day, because that is what is going to benefit that party, me, as well as the organization. Because if you don't come to a resolution, the organization is going to lose out. I'm going to lose out personally, and whoever is in the other side of the conflict is also going to lose out. He or she may believe that they've won the battle, but no, I don't think there's ever a win in the battle unless you come to a solution or come to a resolution.
All right, thank you, Varnika. Conflict resolution has got to do with communication, right? And human beings are supposed to be sort of animals who communicate and think, whereas every animal, all animals communicate. Humans are supposed to be animals who communicate while thinking. And when it comes to conflict resolution, it's more about thinking and feeling when you talk. Basically, because it is said that it's actually 10% is that what matters, the difference in opinion. 90% of the time, it's actually the tone of voice in which you communicate that can, as Annelien said, feeling very nice words, Annelien, feeling uncomfortable with the discomfort. Very nice terminology, very nice way of putting it across. So as a manager, when you're in the managerial position, sometimes you tend to use power, positional power, authority in conflict resolution. This will have, it's very difficult for me to say whether is right or wrong as such. In your own view, what are the instances in which that a manager probably may be forced to use authority, positional power? Well, that wouldn't go well with the subordinate, but then maybe the situation is such, circumstances are such that you got to resort to your authority. I think this would be very practical question for the audience, because these are real life situations where people, employees go through at workplace. Over to you.
Yeah.
Annelien?
Yeah, so I like to use the sort of like 10% rule in a different way here. So in this situation where instead of resorting to rank and authority, which never really bodes well because it's not something ultimately that convinces people. What convinces people is what under their understanding is the right thing, right? Regardless of what rank you are at. So what I would say is, always assume, and this is a great way of actually setting an example for your subordinates to resolve conflict between themselves. Always assume that whoever you're having a disagreement or conflict with, or as a team, just assume 10% is correct. Nobody's ever 100% wrong, right? So if you always assume that the other person is always going to at least be 10% right, now I'm focusing on what is right as opposed to focusing on the 90% that is wrong. And now if I can use that as a sort of like trigger to be able to say, I like that idea, and then continue with what it is that you actually want to get across, you will be able to get far more buy-in than if you were to say, yes, but. Right? Because anything that comes after but, by the way, is discounted. So it doesn't matter if you give like a great 5-minute speech about how amazing you are and you appreciate the value and then you discounted, forget it. You just wasted 5 minutes because the person will only hear what came after but. So you've got to be careful with language. So communication is really, really important and words matter. So if you swap the but for an and, it will make the world of difference. And also within yourself, you are now saying, I'm focusing on what's right. And they don't know it's only the 10%, right? You're showing them empathy, that you understand where they're coming from. You've got some level of connection now. I always say to people, connect before you correct. Because if you're not connecting with someone, you haven't built that rapport, the chances are you're not going to be able to correct them. They're not in a state where they're going to accept it. So make sure, first of all, that you connect, then you can actually use whatever that small minuscule amount. You may disagree about everything, just pick the one thing and say and And this will lead to all the great things. Now they started thinking like you. Now they're going to try using it. And before you know it, you will have come to some kind of resolution. It may not be 100% what they want, but at least they are in agreement that it's the best that can be done. So, you know, I always say you have to be able to be open to the idea that, you know, everybody is right to a very small degree, even if you completely disagree with pretty much everything they say. So if everybody had that attitude, we'd always be looking for what's right as opposed to what's wrong, because we are generally, as humans, we do have a negativity bias. We look for what's wrong before what's right, and that's just because we're wired for survival. So that's just how we are. So we got to work a bit harder to get the positivity out there.
Thank you very much, Anlin. Varnika, can we hear from you, sir?
Yeah, I like the way you put it, Adeline, about how you meet the 10% and think about the 90%. Actually, I had an issue just yesterday with one of my team members where she came up to me and she told me a couple of times about that her targets are set too high, and she was going on about a figure, but I knew in the back of my mind that was not the figure that I had given her. So I told her, no, look, I'll show you. But I didn't have the time to do that. And yesterday it came out as a full-blown conflict, and where she came up to me and said, I can't earn anything. You have set my targets too high and so on. So I said, okay, sit down. I'm going to take the file out. And I showed it to her, right? So it was a time that I could have used my authority and said, look, shut the hell up. This is it. This is a target you have been set, and so on. But I realized that by yesterday that I couldn't solve this out in that manner. So you have to give in to get that buy-in as well. So unlike what Senaka said, I think I don't think the real leadership role is to use authority over your team members. I don't think that works anymore. It may have worked years back, but I don't think that works anymore. You need to buy into, you have to get the buy-in of your team. You need to get the buy-in of your superiors. You need to get the buy-in of your peers if you really need to move ahead in corporate life. So no, I don't think the way forward should be to be using authority because you're at a leadership position. So
Varnika, I beg to differ a little bit with your permission. Aren't there instances where probably the need is such or the business urgency is such that we really don't have that much of time to be diplomatic about it, and you really sometimes, you know, force things through a lot of friction and unhappiness, because sometimes as a leader will see has a destiny sometimes more than the followers. So until the followers come on board, they wouldn't see it. And you know, in such circumstances, you really need to force your way through. Of course, having said that, personally to me, I'd like to share the experience, this understanding when you deal with conflicts, understanding that there is more than one right way of doing something right. It can come from the boss, it can come from the subordinate. It doesn't matter where it's coming from as long as you accept the fact that, okay, this is option 2, this is option 1, this is option 3. What do we pick? In such instances, sometimes the boss will have if the boss is like really, what do you say, very a person who use less authority, more personal power and less positional power would certainly, if he's giving to his subordinates option rather than sticking to his way of doing things right. So this understanding of there is more than one right way of doing something right, I personally find it very rewarding in conflict resolution. But having said that, there are instances in real life, I mean, we like things to be the way we just discussed. It's very nice. We discuss and come to an agreement. But in real life, and Varnika,
Yes.
there are instances you really need to push your weight.
Yeah.
Do you agree with me, or do you have any other differing views? Yes, Anlin. Yeah, Varnika, please.
Okay. Well, if you have actually, let's say you're on a project, if you have set out clear objectives, and if you have set out the real motives and the buy-in of your team and made them understand this is the final goal, this is the final objective, and this is exactly what I expect from you and the timelines. And if your team member has accepted it, and if we had bought into your idea, end of the day, it's a matter of him achieving the ultimate goal. But like you said, there are, yes, practically there are instances where you need to force your weight in. But what will actually happen is, if you do push your weight in, you may resolve the conflict for that moment, but it may go underneath and may simmer into future issues as well. So the best option would be to have a clear communication with your team members on what exactly is your objective and what you want to achieve end of this particular period.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Yes, Anlin.
Yeah, so Varnika, I would just add to that. I agree, and I would say for a leader, if you are not communicating effectively what your vision is, then the chances are people are not going to be very clear about what it is that they need to be making a decision about. And so it's your job as part of being a leader is to have that clarity of thought and have direction. And if pretty much everyone in your team is going against what you think you should be doing, there's a disconnect. You need to think, am I not communicating my vision clearer, or people are not on board, or could this decision really be bad for this organization, right? And so it should be pause for thought in either way. Of course, as leaders, you're expected to make the call when you have to make the call. So, if the buck stops with you, and if you've got to make the call, I think most people understand that if you're taking that on, it's your responsibility for any good that comes and any bad that comes. It rests with you, right? But it's about feeling respected in the process. You never want to disrespect other people's opinions. What you can say is, I cannot do this at this stage because of, and I have to do what feels right. However, if you continuously are hearing the same thing, I would say pay attention, because you might be making a big mistake, just because, again, a leader has a lot that they have to think about, but one of their biggest sort of aims should be to ensure that they have clarity of direction and vision for their followers, because their followers really are following a vision. They're not following the person, right? Because, we don't want the company just falling apart if the person is no longer there tomorrow. So the people buy into a vision, and if they're buying into the vision that you have, then there shouldn't be that level of disagreement. Maybe smaller issues may come up, but I think everybody understands sometimes you have to make the call, right? It's done, and you have to put up with the repercussions. And if you've already built up that collaborative team spirit as opposed to a competitive one, people will be behind you. They'll be like, it's a mistake. And remember, in business, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback and results. And if we hadn't made that mistake, we wouldn't have got to where we are now. So nothing's ever really lost, right? It's one of those situations where you can absolutely use it to your advantage as long as you're an inspired leader. And I think in this day and age, that's really what's needed. It's not about, this sort of very didactic, sort of very hard-hitting, dogmatic person sitting at the top. It doesn't seem to work in the way that it used to, and it's just not effective. So why use it?
Yes, the very reason why conflict management becomes complicated is this, and in my view, in the sense, sometimes in a driving seat, you're forced to sort of forge ahead, knowing that everybody is not on board with you, and even as employee, even as subordinates, they are there for the sake of being there, not really giving their heart and soul to a vision made or a collective agreement made, no matter how hard. Of course, it becomes the responsibility of the leader himself to inculcate or make the people passionate about the vision and where we are going, sort of a thing. No matter how hard you try, there are people who are not on board. That's the reality. In fact, that's the reason why this conflict is something that takes a colossal waste in terms of productivity, right? So sometimes, the culture itself, sometimes somebody wants to do something right. Let's say you see in office scenario, certain things happening a certain way, and you think that's not the way to do it. There's a different way. This is the way it should be. But the culture is such that if you try to make changes, it would create a whole lot of issues. So then those are some circumstances or instances where the individual asks him or herself, is it good to keep quiet, doing what is right, or join the bandwagon? That's the culture. Let's just move on with it, sort of a thing. Now, what are your sentiments on that? May I ask from Varnika, and of course then get back to Annelien with your permission, please.
Okay, cultures are things that are basically set in organizations, but okay, you have the older organizations which has set ways of thinking, set ways of doing things, and so on. But I think organizations are moving away from most of these set cultures, and you have subcultures forming within departments, within teams, and so on. I think what matters most to a success of a particular unit or a particular group of a group is the culture that you set in among yourselves. For example, if I say I have a set way, or rather I have a way of doing things within my team, which leads to the success of my team, that will contribute towards the success of the organization as a whole. So you need to have that set up within, because I can't go and change the culture of the organization, nor can I go and say, no, this is how it should be done to another department or to another a team. All I can do is make that change, bring that change among our team. So if there was something that is being done wrong last year, okay, so it's time that we move ahead and change. So we do that quite regularly, almost on a monthly basis. We take up a review at the beginning of the month. So next week we have our monthly reviews, which where we reflect on the month that had gone by, how we did things, what went wrong, what went right, and you have people coming forward and saying, look, can we do something like this month where we can bring about this amount of change? So that's the kind of thing that we engage in order to bring about the change that is necessary for the situation. So that is the culture that we have set in within our team. It's not necessarily the organization's culture. So that leads to a lot of building vision and building trust among ourselves to know that, okay, I mean, I know one of my guys, if they come up with an idea, if you do go ahead with it, you give that person that empowerment to and the confidence to go ahead and execute that project for that particular month and bring results in. But if you have a set way of doing things, that doesn't happen.
Thank you, Varnika. Yes, Annelien, I know you're waiting.
So let's take it back to basics. We have to teach new habits for managing differences, right? And when it comes to work culture, listen, when I walk into businesses, I can sense the energy in that workplace. Nobody has to say anything. Nobody has to do anything. I can just walk in, just by the way people are interacting, moving around, and just doing their work. I can sense this is an open place. People feel relaxed, and there seems to be a very relaxed work culture, but people are still working. They're not just on their phones. And you can go into other businesses, and as you open the door, you can sense the heightened emotion, you know, that you can just feel the stress as you're walking down and heads down, and, you know, seemingly people are working, but as to how much they're working, who knows, right? And so it can be very deceptive, right? It's like if you walk into a classroom and, you know, kids are sort of like talking over each other, and, you know, people are moving around, someone will judge it and say, there's no learning going on here, right? And people who are sitting, and you go into another classroom and people are quiet, sitting in straight rows, making lots of notes. They're like, oh, this is the classroom that everybody's learning well. Well, we take that and we take that to our businesses, and, you know, many businesses just continued with that same way, that if someone is quiet, they're getting on with their work, meet their deadlines, everything is going well. But work culture is not just what you see, it's what you feel, and it's what you understand to be true, regardless of what the CEO says, regardless of what anybody says. So I always say, you know, it's really interesting that we don't interview for the very skills that make up a work culture. We just interview for skills that we think are required for the job technically, but not in terms of what's going to allow the work culture to feel enriched. And so we need to be interviewing for adaptability, we should be interviewing for somebody's patience, non-judgment, having the capacity to have a level of empathy. You know, these are actual skills that if you have enough people, or the majority within a work culture, you're going to create a space where people are actually going to really work at their highest potential, because they don't feel like half their energy is used just safeguarding themselves, just keeping safe from management, keeping safe from their peers. They can use that energy in a way that's really going to propel the company. And so when we don't pay attention to what's really possible with people, we just ignore really the potential of what the company can be. So I always say, listen, you've got to make sure that you interview for the right attributes. Otherwise, you'll get great people who get a result, but everybody will hate them. Like, everybody knows, like, who's the, you know, the bully, and who's the kind one, and who's, like, everybody knows. You don't need to carry out a poll. You can just go talking to people and you go, that person's trustworthy, I can rely on them. That person is like this. So everybody has opinions. And so what we want to be able to encourage is a space where people feel open enough to discuss whatever vulnerabilities there are, because that in itself is a sign of courage. And that's what we want to make sure our workers are. So yeah, I would definitely say every action leads to an equal reaction, and people need to offload their feelings somewhere. So if you say something to someone and it's not worked, they got to take that feeling somewhere. They offload it to the subordinate. The subordinate takes it to someone else. That person takes it home. They take it out on their partner at home. They take it out on their kids. I say you're just revolving that emotion, right? So it's just about bringing awareness to the situation.
Thank you very much, Anil. I truly wish we had 1 more hour to discuss on the next topic that you just brought up, selecting right people. I mean, that's something I think probably Luminary will consider another session, maybe with you and Varnika. Selecting right people actually is a real challenge where organizations face these days. And are we really relying on the right techniques in selecting people, or are we giving it a time restriction, just settle down? You know, it's a compromise at times. You will know that these are the best, but then you got to basically accept what is on offer, and you have no choice. So it's very interesting. All right. So we agreed that, you know, communication is a big part of conflict resolution. What kind of a role you think active listening plays in conflict resolution? Meaning, the feeling that you are being heard by the boss or by the peer, sometimes resolve the problem without you having to mediate in it. This is something that I actually experienced. What are your sentiments on that? Maybe Varnika, can we?
I think it resolves almost 100% of the issue just by listening, because the fact that your team member understands that you are empathetic towards him or her, or the issue in hand makes them feel more comfortable, makes them feel more empowered to work, to be with you. So I think that resolves the problem to a great extent. So I believe that the resolution needs a lot of listening. So if you're not prepared to listen, I don't think you should be ready to resolve the issue. You might as well put it off to another day, or you might as well take a step back and be in a frame of mind that you're prepared to listen to that person.
Yeah, yes. Annelien,
yeah, so I am a huge advocate of active listening, and I always make it a point to allow people to understand fully what that means. So if I'm actively listening to someone, I have to make sure that I am not interrupting. That is number one, right? Even if I'm interrupting to say, I agree because now I'm making it about me and they are talking about whatever it is that they are making reference to, right? And the other thing is I've got to come in from a place of no judgment, because as I mentioned earlier, we all have our own mental models on beliefs about what we think is right, what is wrong, how we've lived, and it's all according to our experiences and history, and that person brings their own. So even in my mind, I might be making judgments about, well, that sounds really odd, strange. I cannot allow that to come into this space. So I've really got to go in completely open and not interrupt, not show any kind of judgment at all, and just remain open to that 10%, even if it's something that I disagree with. You will continue to find more and more and more. And this is what our brain does. It plays tricks on us, right? So the more we find right, the more it will continue to say, because now we're like, we've made this kind of like call that this person has something useful to offer. Let me see what else they can offer. So now I'm really alert, because I'm like, this is really exciting. What else are they going to come up with? And getting curious is super important. So you have to not interrupt, you have to have no judgment, and you have to be really curious. Without those, what you'll find is that you're just going to be listening to respond. And if you're just listening to respond, you're never going to get the full beauty of what that conversation can really mean. So that's super important in any organization. And I think it needs to be taught. People just assume, oh, I can actively listen. I would say, role model it so that you can practice it. It's a practice, it's a process. It's not just something that it's abstract and you can just do. And by the way, it's not that easy, right? So keeping quiet is not easy, especially when it goes against what you really believe. But once the person feels seen and heard, they feel acknowledged. And when they feel acknowledged, they have no reason to fight for, space to be heard, because they've already been heard, right? And so that's a really, really important part of understanding. And when we're looking at disagreements, it's about people are generally better at inflicting pain than acknowledging and actually feeling it. That's what it is. So we just inflict it instead of acknowledging it. So we've got to be able to have that conversation with someone and say, this is how it made me feel, and this is what it means, as opposed to just inflicting it and bashing back.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. And another common pitfall in active listening is, actually it's a confession from my end, if I add my sentiments, sometimes through your experience, when the other person is talking to you, you understand it before he or she finishes what they have to say, but you got to be very patient not to demonstrate that in your body language. Otherwise the person will not be happy or convinced that he or she has been fully heard. So this is something actually more relevant for the person at the driving seat when in conflict resolution. Moving on, I think we are into the last 10 minutes of the discussion. It has been, I think, very interesting perspectives we heard from both of you. I would like to spend the next few minutes on this area. How do we separate the person from the issue? This is another big challenge, big obstacle that people face in conflict resolution. You see the issue with the person. You sometimes fail to separate the person from the issue and look at the issue and try to resolve it. I think these are very important. This would be a very important insight for the audience. if they could hear from both of you. Yes, Varnika.
Yeah, I think, like I said at the beginning, you need to take a step back and understand what who the person is, who is involved in the conflict, and what actually is the conflict and the issue in hand. Once you are able to segregate these two, then it's a matter of addressing the issue. So from a corporate perspective, or from a background which we operate in, it's a matter of setting out BPRs, a business process for each and every task. So it's written out, or it's shared among peers, it's shared among our own team members, it's shared among the rest of the teams in the organizations, that this is how this particular process is run. And these are the inputs that are needed at various points, and these are the things that needs to be addressed. So then you're actually dealing, when there is an issue, you're actually dealing with an issue and not with the person who's supposed to be doing it. Because the person who is supposed to be doing it may not be the person, may not be the issue, but the process that has actually gone wrong. So you will be addressing the process and the issue in that process then and there. But from a personal perspective, I think it's utmost important that you should be able to segregate these two, because if not, you're going to have personal clashes, not just at organizational situation, but once you come out of the organization, you should be able to bash it out or have a chat with your colleague and then come out and have a beer or something like that end of the day and say, look, hey, that was that and this is this.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
Anlene?
Yeah, so I think that ideally it's always good to be able to create that space and to, this is the person and this is the issue. But we're human beings, right? And it's really hard depending on what the issue is. If it's something that's fairly process-wise and it's not engaged with your values, the chances are you can say, okay, I can make that separation. I'm not going to take it personally. It's got really nothing to do with the other person. It's just a process and we can do things differently and I won't take offense. So, but in order to do that, I have to create awareness, I have to create a space, and I have to consciously say, this is not about me, it's not about the other person, this is about the issue. However, having said that, and having spoken to people and coached them within these environments, I find that that has a limited effect because only people who consciously practice that can get good at it. And most people don't really practice it consciously in a way that has true impact. So what I would say, and this is something that we use in the coaching world, Simon Sinek uses it in a lot of his work too, and that is, if you find a situation and you want to be able to resolve it, there's like 3 things that you must make sure you do. The first one is you have to be able to say specifically what the situation is. Then you have to say how that situation made you feel. And then you have to say the impact that that situation has had. So giving a very quick example, I'm sitting in a boardroom, there's lots of people there, and someone undercuts me, makes my point for me, goes ahead and they get credit, right? I'm now sitting in a situation, it's hard for me to say separate the person from the issue, right? So I have to be able to specifically say to that person, create a meeting for them first, schedule it in, and be able to say specifically, what is the situation? And I can't say, you always cut me off, even if I think he always cuts me off, right? I have to say on Monday morning at that meeting, you cut me off when you said, and you have to say exactly what they said. This made me feel disrespected and undermined. This is about me. I'm not talking about you. It's not personal. I'm telling you how I felt. And I worry, this is the impact, I worry if this continues, we are not going to be able to work effectively as a team. Now, their first responses get defensive, but, and they do this. And what you have to do is just repeat it, right? And don't get involved in the drama of it. You just repeat it. this happened specifically at this point, made me feel this way, and I am worried if this continues, this will happen. And what happens is that it's no longer a personal thing. The person has to go away and think about it, because it's not a generalization. Oh, you always do this. And, you know, this person's always got that attitude, because then no one's going to listen. It's discounted and it's finished. So I find that that's a more effective way of dealing with any conflict that may come up, as opposed to trying to separate it. Because I say we're humans, we're full of emotions. Let's not deny that, but let's channel it in an effective way so that everybody wins. And hopefully that becomes a learning point for the person I just spoke to, because at the time they may not agree with it, but it will make them think. And I'm not shouting at them. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying this is how it made me feel. Even if you didn't intend it, I give them the benefit of the doubt. You know, regardless of whether that was something that they felt they did or not. So hopefully, you know, people can use that and see how effective it is.
Thank you very much, Annelien. Thank you, Varnika, for your very invaluable perspectives. Actually, you brought us to a very important point, Annelien. Let's leave the audience with that thought. I mean, before getting into any conflict resolution, do not get into any conflict resolution without answering that $1 million question. That is, what are we trying to resolve? Without knowing that, you should not get into any sort of discussion in conflict resolution, because you would go nowhere, or you will fix something that is never broken, that was not broken. So this brings us to the end of the session. I do believe the audience enjoyed very much and got some valuable insights. So while thanking the audience, Varnika and Annelien, hoping to see you again, I sign off, handing proceedings to Anton. Over to you, Anton.
Thank you, Senaka. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Annelien and Varnika, for joining us and for the knowledge share. Certainly an afternoon well spent. Senaka, for steering the conversation, thank you very much. Takeaway, I guess, is disagreements, differences of opinion, and conflicting perspectives on key issues inevitably arises in any context where people are working together. I think Varnika highlighted that clearly. And while not all conflict is negative, creative solutions and new ideas can often emerge from the cut and thrust of a debate, as Annelien brought out. So if ignored, this is crucial, conflicts can escalate or spread to affect others. If they're not resolved, situations may deteriorate, leading to litigation or damaging the organization's reputation. Conflict can be costly in terms of time and money. So on that note, it is vital to manage the conflict constructively. And let me leave you with a quote from Dorothy Thomas. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with it. Thank you, especially to H1 for powering the series today and for the rest of the week. Next week, do join us again for Revive and Grow segment. Revive and Grow segment, where we are looking at basic lean principles to help productivity. What's our social media space for more information? The next hour coming up is This, That, and the Other, Varun Chandmohan, and we are covering yet another controversial topic, discussing the good, the bad, and the ugly of dignity of work. Will it ever arrive here? Enjoy the rest of the day. Stay safe, stay productive.